Well, new fallout today after a dismissive Justice Department reaction to a scathing report about Operation Fast and Furious. That's the gun-running sting that resulted in some 2,000 weapons being put in the hands of some very dangerous Mexican drug cartels by our own government. 5 high-ranking members of the ATF are singled out as responsible for that operation in a report just issued by some House members. Not one of these men has been fired. They've all been reassigned. And the Justice Department is now calling the substance of this congressional report distorted and debunked. Joining me now, the man who led this congressional investigation, Republican Congressman Darrell Issa, who is chairman of the House Committee on Oversight and Government Reform. So, Mr. Chairman, this is the first of 3 reports in which you try to get to the bottom of what happened here and who was behind it. The first report focuses on what happened at the ATF and who there was responsible. You identify 5 guys. Then you're going to focus on the Department of Justice in later reports, but Tracy Schmaler of the Department of Justice, Mr. Chairman, comes out and says as follows. Predictably, this Republican report reiterates many of the distortions and now debunked conspiracy theories that Representative Issa has been advancing for a year and a half, and says the one thing, and she says that, including the fiction, that these flawed tactics were the brainchild of this administration as opposed to the reality that this pattern dates back to 2006 and the prior administration. Your thoughts?
Well, first of all, it's not surprising that the first Attorney General ever to be held in contempt would spin everything and anything as somehow inaccurate without providing one fact as to any inaccuracy. You know, this is over 200 pages in a report with over 1,000 pages of sightings and inclusive material. We were very careful. Additionally, what we did is undeniable. We've shown that where it was at ATF, and we've included these previous tactics Neely and others promoted. We've also talked about the differences and the fact that they were failed programs shut down during the previous administration and brought back with full knowledge by this administration, and that's what they object to. They'd like to make it all Bush did it, which in this case, in the case of Fast and Furious, couldn't be further from the truth. Our next report, when we get into the specifics of Lanny Brewer and others who had an active role in reviving a closed program, one that had been, in fact, considered a failure and shut down during the Bush administration, and then putting it on steroids, leading to the death of Brian Terry and ultimately to the cover-up by Attorney General Eric Holder.
You talk in your report about how this was what is known as an OSADEF operation at Department of Justice. Can you explain what that means and why that is significant when it comes to what you believe the Department of Justice knew or should have known with respect to this gun-running operation?
Megan, that's the most important thing for people to understand. The Justice Department doesn't mind us blaming ATF. They've been throwing them under the bus. But in fact, these combined task force for drug task force are all about the Justice Department, along with the Homeland Security, putting together a team that's supposed to work together, coordinate, and nothing could have been further from the truth. Information was not shared. There was stovepiping. Clearly, DEA and others have culpability. And our report goes into some of those problems that show, yes, ATF has problems, and we have some people we'd like to see fired, but we also see problems all the way up to the top of justice. And candidly, the stovepiping also goes over to Homeland Security and the fact that there were people from that cabinet position who are on the OSADEF, but who, when something goes wrong, pretend like they were just along for the ride. That's part of what the American people want us to do on the reform side. They don't just want an investigation, they want real reform.
They keep saying, the Department of Justice, trying to say that, you know, they didn't know anything about the controversial tactics, that this is a witch hunt, that this was an ATF operation, that yes, they signed off on some wiretap applications, but they didn't know about the controversial aspects of the program. I want to tell our viewers that this OSADEF is basically a designation you get at DOJ, which means it's a big deal at DOJ. It stands for Organized Crime Drug Enforcement Task Force Strike Force Operation, and that means DOJ is making a big deal out of this. Could it be an OSADEF operation at DOJ and DOJ not know about the intricate details of the operation?
Well, that's exactly the point, is they can't have it both ways. They can't say that they knew about about wide receiver and it was flawed, and then in fact start up Fast and Furious and then claim they didn't know about it. They couldn't claim all of these things that we see sequentially, particularly under the OSADEF, where U.S. Attorney Dennis Burke, who has resigned in disgrace, and his superiors were being read in, and they're saying, well, we were read in, we were given this information, but we didn't actually get told anything. Well, that's a problem. What's the point of having briefings that go into the details of these and then try to have plausible deniability?
I want to ask
Megan,
you... Sorry, I wanted to ask you one question before I have to run, and that is, of these 5 guys who you point to who are responsible for this at ATF, no one's been fired. They're still on the federal taxpayer dime, and the head guy, Ken Melson, he's working for DOJ right now. Are the taxpayers still paying all these folks, and why?
They are still paying all these folks. We are concerned that there has been no real repercussions. And more importantly, there's been no change in how it works. Kenneth Melson, as the acting director, clearly was in over his head and is an example of what happens when you have acting director after acting director for 6 years. That's part of the problem. President Obama did not put up somebody else other than Kenneth Melson. He simply left him in as an acting director, a former U.S. attorney. His replacement is a former U.S. attorney. What we don't have for the 1,800 men and women of ATF is a permanent professional that we can rely on to know what's going on in a relatively large law enforcement organization. 1,800 people spread around the world is a lot of people. They need a real leader, and right now there isn't one. Yeah,
the DOJ says wait for its own inspector general to come out with his final report, and that is something that is in process. We don't know when we will get that.
We look forward to it.
But we will see. Chairman Issa, thank you, sir.
Thank you.